Hello and welcome to Views on News. I'm Jawad. Tehami. Pakistan's Finance Minister Mohammad Aurangzeb has said that the country's economy is going in the right direction. While speaking at the floor of the National Assembly, he said people will have to pay the taxes and sought the Parliament's support to the government for an increase in the tax revenue as well as to improve the energy equation. He also told the House that the fiscal position this year is far better as compared to the previous year, and the current account was also in surplus, and the forex reserves had reached $8 billion. The finance minister further told the House that the fiscal year will end with $9 to $10 billion of the forex reserves by the end of this financial year, as the next tranche of $1.1 billion of the standby arrangement by the IMF will come by the end of this particular week. He further said that the country needs the structural reforms, increase in the tax net, and the privatization of the loss-making state-owned enterprises. Will be taking up these important aspects which have been highlighted and mentioned by the finance minister at the floor of the National Assembly, and the significance associated with these particular mentions. Also, in another major development, we have seen Pakistan Stock Exchange has touched the new highs as KSE 100 index crossed the 72,000 level for the first time in the country's history. Also, the Pakistani rupee remained largely stable against the greenback. All these important developments are for discussion in today's show. For that, we are honored to have been joined in the studio by Dr. Manzoor Ahmad. He's the member of the Task Force on FBR and Tax Reforms and also former ambassador to the World Trade Organization. Dr. Ahmad, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Later in the show, we'll be joined by other participants also. I'll be introducing them as they join in. So let's start the discussion. Dr. Ahmad, with this particular development, we'll talk about the Pakistan Stock Exchange touching the new highs, crossing the 72,000 mark for the first time in the country's history. What does that primarily depict? Does that depict there are overall the improved economic indicators in the country and an improved economic sentiment also?
Yes, obviously the businessmen and other investors and some of it is the foreign money coming in. They expect that the worst part of Pakistan's economy is behind them, and economic indicators are improving. And you know, you already mentioned several of these. I mean, we used to have a big trade deficit, overall current account deficit, and now it's surplus. I mean, it's something rare, but it's a good thing we are balanced. So that is one thing. And you know, this year our many sectors. Let me mention a few. Like agriculture did very well. We are not really need to import any of our major needs of wheat or maybe not even perhaps some little cotton, because cotton we import and some export. But already because of such a bumper crop of wheat, the prices have fallen, you know, both of wheat as well as atta in the market. And I see most things going in positive direction, yes.
So you specifically talked about this particular sector, the agriculture sector. Now,
Yeah.
the agriculture credit provisional, that is 34.7% as per the monthly economic update in the Outlook March 2024. It goes on to talk about that in Rabi season 2023-24, the wheat sowing has surpassed the target of 8.998 million hectares. You already mentioned there was no need of importing wheat or having that atta from abroad also. So other related factors associated with this particular sector also gave the indication of improvement. The reasons associated with this?
Well, the reason, obviously one big reason is that weather has been okay. I mean, that's been holding. But I think government measures that they took, especially for cotton and wheat and everything, already, you know, 6 months, a year advance, as to how much of the area should go for cotton for this, and also maybe perhaps after the flooding, there's some new, I should say, fertile.
The
Fertility comes in.
Has come to the land after the
flooding. And it gets renewed, rejuvenated. And so that also counts, because you suddenly go down, but then it's a rejuvenation. That could be, and I think all these factors perhaps.
But that's the positive aspect of flooding. So.
Well, some of it is planning, and some of it is natural.
Right. So talking about the other specific targets now, talking about the current account surplus, 619 million posted this time around, much improved as compared to the previous one. What are the reasons for this particular thing?
One reason we just discussed, because we spend a lot of money on agriculture, and this year our agriculture exports have, I think, perhaps increased by more than 50%. Agriculture exports have now become the second biggest after textile. I mean, so we used to have a textile by long margin, and agriculture maybe 2 or 3 billion, and this year perhaps it will be 6-7 billion. So that's one big. There was one big hole because we had to import so much of wheat and other things. So we're not importing that. But not only that, we earned, especially rice. We crossed more than 3 billion, I mean, more than 50% up. But it wasn't just rice. It was many other agriculture, even our fruits and vegetables and sesame seeds and maize and many other things. They broke records. I mean, everything was 30-40% up.
So when we talk about this particular development that happened at the Pakistan Stock Exchange, is there any sort of an expectation as far as the inflation coming down, and later on subsequently the monetary policy rate also being slashed by the Monetary Policy Committee also as a result of a downward trajectory of the inflation? Is that improved?
Yes, that's a big factor, because you remember last year perhaps it was at a height of 38%, came down to 26%, now less than 21%, and expected to go to in double digits. Perhaps next year it will stay somewhere 14-15, but then in the year after it's expected to come down to less than 10%. So inflation is playing a big role, and the immediately if we bring down the interest rate that was high because of inflation, to control inflation, if this is coming down, maybe the interest rates come down. So with the interest rate coming down, inflation will further.
So that actually spreads a positive sentiment among the business community and the investors?
Yeah.
So that brings that particular growth that what we witnessed today at the Pakistan Stock Exchange.
Yes. They expect that any time now this interest rate will start coming down. So perhaps that will bring, because people are holding on to, they are not investing because the interest rate was so high. If you borrow at 22-23%, you can't really expect to gain much. So they think that if the minute it starts coming down, maybe more investment will come, and more industrial activity.
Point is well taken, Dr. Ahmad. Let me proceed towards Mr. Saddam Hussain. Is joining us on the phone line. He is an economist associate with the Pakistan Institute of Development Economics. Mr. Hussain, thank you very much for taking time out for Views on News tonight. We really appreciate that. Talking about this important development at the Pakistan Stock Exchange, as per your understanding, what has actually led to this Karachi Stock Exchange 100 index crossing 72,000 mark, first time in the history of the country?
Thank you for inviting me. To me, I would say that obviously the new government is in. There's a bit of stability, and the foreign delegations from Saudi, Iran, and other positive things happened that might have led to a bit of confidence in the business community and the companies that are listed on stock exchange. Although I would not consider stock exchange as a true indicator of economy in our country, because it's just a handful of companies listed on stock exchange. So it should not be taken as a health of the economy, as an indicator of the health of the economy. But it's good that the business is going up and stock exchange is going up. But however, the issues within the economy remain same.
Right, Mr. Hussain, when we talk about finance minister talking about the inflation, it is on a downward trajectory. We see the policy rate sustained at 22%. Now, with the consumer price index going towards a downward trajectory, is there any expectation to the cut in the monetary policy rate at the same time, also subsequently, which naturally gives that boost into the confidence of the investors that actually has led to this particular rally that we have witnessed at the PSX?
If you ask my opinion, I guess the policy rate should come down in in a couple of months or so, because what we are witnessing, that our inflation is not really coming from the interest rate and all that. It's coming from the food inflation and oil inflation, the components of inflation. If you break it down, so if it was to be controlled by the interest rate, it could have been controlled a few months ago or a year ago, but we kept rising it and inflation was not controlled. It's maybe because of the food prices have come down and oil prices have come down, so it has reduced a bit. But there's a conflict in the Middle East, so the prices are again very, very volatile. But our inflation is not particularly linked with the interest rate. So I guess if it is kept high to control the inflation, then we have failed. So it should come down to boost the confidence of investors, so they can procure loans and business activity could go on and the demand side can go up, and that might inject new energy into the economy. But controlling inflation, I guess it was not an effective tool as we have seen in the past 2 years.
Okay, so when we talk about the stability of Pakistani rupee against the greenback, it has remained largely stable. What reasons do you associate with that?
I would associate with the diplomatic effort, the diplomacy with the friendly countries, and we have been able to procure loans and aid, etc. So we have not been cash strapped as the world imagined. So we somehow managed to keep appropriate amounts of reserves with us. So I guess that was a good move, but in the short run. It could only be effective in the short run, which we did, but in the long term, we have to really focus on industry, export promotion, and, really kicking the wheel of the economy, deregulation, privatization, so that private investors would come. We should deregulate the economy so that more economic activity can take place and more economic transaction can take place. And that in the long run, we can have a good economy running, and we have the foreign exchange, and we have a healthy economy. So it was a short-term move, the diplomatic efforts, but in the long run, we need to really focus on the productivity in real terms, which means picking up the industrial sector and export in particular.
Increasing the productivity. So you've already mentioned a couple of key areas, for example, industry, enhancing the exports, and also the privatization of the loss-making enterprises. And now, specifically talking about the exports, there is a roadmap that has been envisioned by the Finance Minister, Mohammad Aurangzeb. Also, exports being one of those key areas in order to stabilize the economy. Which key sectors would you recommend the authorities here in Pakistan should actually focus on in order to enhance the exports in those particular key sectors, as per your understanding?
To start with, we should focus the areas which we have a comparative advantage, for example, textile, etc., sports goods, and the surgical goods. With that, we should also focus on IT sector as it is booming in our country. But whatever the sector is, we should really focus on one issue, the policy certainty. The biggest issue the industrialists and the industrial sector is facing is the uncertainty of the policy. Nobody is investing, FDI is not coming, nobody is willing to come to Pakistan because there's uncertainty. They don't know what will happen after 2 months. So if the government ensure one thing, that there's a policy certainty, let's say, for example, if they announce this is the framework, this is the policy for the industry, and it will remain same for the next 5 years or 8 years, then any sector can pick up. So we need to really ensure that we need to sit down and have a proper framework for the industry and should stick to it for at least 5 years.
Right, talking, you already mentioned the importance of the IT sector. What potential does this particular sector carries as far as the enhancement of the Pakistani exports to the outer world is concerned?
IT sector, for example, there are two components of IT sector. One is goods and services. We have been lacking behind in goods. India is doing very well, so we can learn from the friendly countries, and we can learn from the international best experiences, what India has done and what other countries have done. But in services sector, there's a lot of potential already. Our freelancers are offering their services across the world, and they are earning good money and they are earning remittances. Obviously, there are problems, to the transaction, how transactions happen. So if we make these more transparent and more user-friendly, so we can have more remittances and more foreign exchange. So I guess in the short run, we can just instill the skills and training to the freelancers so they can place themselves in a better position to offer more valuable services and earn a better income for the country and for themselves as well. In the long run, we should also focus on the manufacturing side of the IT sector. So this is a great potential for the country, first services and then the manufacturing and IT.
Right, Mr. Hussain, when we talk about the inflation on a downward trajectory, now to keep that particular trend sustained, are there any measures or interventions that could be made as far as the authorities are concerned?
This is a tricky question because what I witness, I may be wrong, but what I have observed so far, like our inflation is coming from food prices and oil prices. So that's really not in our control. You know, the conflict in the Middle East and the Russia-Ukraine war. So if you see the Middle East conflict was volatile in the last week, and it may again be volatile, and the prices will go up. Same as with the food prices in Russia, Ukraine, the Black Sea region. Most of the food and wheat comes from that region or transported through that region. So if that happens, obviously it will affect the food prices. And then again, there's seasonal changes, the floods, etc. So it's again impact the food prices. So in the short run, there's not any really control that we can control or bring it down. So it's kind of a volatile. We can't do anything really about it, if you ask me, frankly. But we can, help subsidize the people, not general subsidy, but we can subsidize the particular segment of the society which are very much needy, or the poor segment, so that they are not affected by the inflationary effect of the economy.
Right, Mr. Saddam Hussain, thank you very much for joining in at Views on News Tonight. Really appreciate that. Associated with Pakistan Institute of Development Economics. Now, let me bring in another participant who's just joined in the studio, Mr. Sultan Ali Haider. Thank you very much for coming.
It's always a pleasure.
To the studio all the way. Really appreciate that. We're discussing as the major development happened at the Pakistan Stock Exchange, crossing 72,000 mark, first time in the history of the country. What are your understanding? What is your understanding regarding as to what reasons have contributed to this particular value?
My basic understanding is, not to put a damper on the excitement, but also in a way to excite people more. In terms of US dollar value, right? So our currency depreciated. So stock market had to go up. However, due to the uncertainty, political economic uncertainty for the last 1.5 years, it was not going up. Now that the market is seeing that politically the country is stabilizing, economically the country is stabilizing, all of the economic indicators are going really good. So now the market has started to rally. So in that perspective, I do feel in terms of whoever is investing now, also in terms of mark-to-market terms, it is supposed to go up. So from that angle, these are exciting times, good time to invest in. And I think this would carry on.
So, as already we were discussing, Mr. Saddam Hussain was of the view when we talk about this particular rally at the stock exchange, it doesn't happen with the true indicator of the overall economy. So, when you already mentioned the other economic indicators are also on the side of improvement, right? What are those key particular sectors that which we actually can celebrate upon, that they actually give the true picture that the country's economy is headed in the right direction towards the stability, and later on it would be more towards consolidation?
You see, I mean, the lead indicators are lag indicators, right? And also in terms of, if you talk in terms of economic health, right? So just like a person may have fever, so fever is just one indicator, but we call it symptomatic, right? So first indicators are where are your reserves and whether you are in current account surplus or deficit, right? So that gives you the initial trajectory. So in those indicators, we have been able to stabilize. So in terms of critical issues, we have been able to resolve those issues. Now what you're talking about more substantial, more fundamental, that is what the new finance minister is also talking about, right? So those are then come about the structural reforms where you try to fix. So we are talking about the state-owned enterprises, what are the issues there in terms of our debt servicing and all of those things. The kind of thing that you're talking about which should excite us further, that is something we'll see maybe 1 year or 2 years down the road. That is then you look at different economic growth in different sectors. So you see, okay, what is the growth in industrial output? What is the growth in agriculture sector? So those things will come in a year's time. What I am personally foreseeing is that people had essentially withdrawn from a lot of economic and business activity, investment activity. Now they would be coming in and seeing positive indicators. They would want to participate and they would want to start early so that they reap the benefits, right? So smart investors will get in early. Not so smart investors, maybe they will come in late. So whoever gets in early will get to reap the benefits.
So there is a roadmap envisioned by the finance minister, of course, that includes the enhancing the exports, also increasing the tax base, also the structural reforms that you also mentioned, the privatization of the loss-making enterprises. Also, we'll discuss these one by one. Firstly, let's talk a little in detail about the current account surplus, 619 million in March 2024, quite a considerable figure that we have seen. Also the forex reserves stand at $8 billion at the moment, held by the State Bank of Pakistan. What do these two indicators actually depict, and the core reasons associated with the stability in the forex reserves also, and the current account posting a surplus?
So what these two indicate, unfortunately, very unfortunately, we have seen these times in in recent past, right? In last 1 to 2 years, right? Or maybe 3-4 years during Corona days also, that current account, we are in current account deficit, right? So we need more FX reserves. So our FX reserves are depleting. Then they are going down. Then we have seen numbers like 3 billion. We have been talking about, do we have 2 weeks of FX reserves to cover our imports, right? So country can come to a standstill. Now those send such bad signals globally, and they also send very bad signals locally. Now compared to that, when we were talking about, okay, we have made a payment of Eurobond, still we are at 8 billion. We are foreseeing that, okay, another 1.1 billion of IMF will come in. The finance minister is saying he's foreseeing we'll close the year 30th June maybe at $10 billion, right? At the same time, when you're looking at the surplus means that in terms of momentum, month on month, the way our economy is structured at the moment. So our FX reserves will keep on adding. It will not be depleting. Now, so this is all of the rosy picture, right? Now that the patient is stabilizing, now we'll start addressing the critical, not the critical, chronic illnesses, right? So now what we have to do is we have to really jumpstart and push our industrial base. That will require, that is going to put a lot of burden again on FX reserves and will push us in the direction of a bit of deficits on current account deficit. Why? Because a lot of imports will happen to re-energize the industry. Maybe we'll have to import a lot of raw materials, right? So it's a tougher, longer game, and that is why, lastly, what I would add is the finance minister, I really agree with that. He is talking about a longer IMF program. so that we get out of this cycle where we're trying to manage a single year or single quarter. So it's a longer program, longer than 3 years. So that is something which will give a lot of stability.
Right, I'll come back to you about this last point that you've just mentioned. Let me go to Dr. Ahmad. Dr. Ahmad, talking about the new longer and a larger IMF program under the extended fund facility that Pakistan is seeking from the IMF. The negotiations are perhaps going to happen in the mid of May. How crucial is that after this particular effort being brought in by the authorities here in Pakistan, then going towards that EFF, larger and longer program by the IMF after this SBA? How crucial is that?
Well, it is very crucial because, you know, for the last 4 or 5 years that you will see, we're always on the verge of default, you know, if the IMF program is not happening. Now, one of the things for this stock market is because when they see that things are moving positively towards this IMF, you know, next tranche and thing, so that's also pushing. So this is, for the time being, we are not out of woods, so we need another IMF.
So how hopeful are you, given the fact that Pakistani authorities had been strictly following all those conditions that had been set earlier during the negotiations or the approval of the standby arrangement? We've got 2 successful reviews, and there is a huge hope for the last and the final tranche to be released by the end of this particular week, as per the finance minister. Given that particular track record in the recent past, what are the chances as far as the negotiations and the success of Pakistani authorities getting that new IMF program approved after the negotiations in May?
I think we are in a good situation, because if you look at IMF program, previous one and one before, most of their focus was on 3 or 4 things. One, you should have the market exchange rate, and we are already there. It's market exchange rate. I think there's not 2 or 3 different rates. I mean, so it's stable there, and the State Bank is not intervening in the market. So that's one. The other, IMF was always pushing for recovering the international price of you know, energy products like LNG or electricity, etc., lowering subsidies, and that difficult steps have been taken over the last 1 or 2 years. I think there are 2 or 3 such other things, and almost you know, and yeah, the third major emphasis was on privatization, and the government has really been pushing. And we just heard the finance minister saying that for PIA, they're hoping for some major progress by June, July this year. So they're moving with full speed.
Right.
So I can see that all the major conditions that IMF has been pushing for years, and slowly we are there.
So when we talk about the new negotiations happening for the new, larger and a longer IMF program, you see similar sort of conditions being kept in the new program for its approval, or are there any other dimensions that could be explored by the IMF in order to give Pakistan?
There would be other things, like I think the IMF has been telling us that our expenditure is far beyond what we earn. That's one thing. The other thing is that they always think that our revenue, stuck around 9% of GDP, should be at least 15%, what is there in India or many other developing countries. So they think that, you know, we should get to that norm within the next 2 or 3 years. So some of these things, you know, and maybe they'll push, once these 2 or 3 privatization, then they'll push for this energy sector, because there's a lot of losses in that with all these discos, etc., and maybe they'll push for that also.
Right. You already pointed out about the privatization of PIA. Now, the finance minister also said there is an expression of interest for the PIA privatization that has been submitted, and we expect the bids to come in. Specifically talking about the dividends, what does PIA's privatization carry along?
Well, I think what they're trying to do is so that they can come in, they can get some good buyers. So I think the debts have been put in another holding company, and also I think they're not going to sell the key assets like this hotel in Paris and some other things, but mostly it's the routes and the planes, etc., and all that. I think that. I'm not 100% clear, but that's what it seems.
Right. Mr. Haider, going back to the IMF program, a new, larger, longer IMF program under the extended fund facility, keeping the track record of the recent past by the Pakistani authorities, the measures and the efforts that have been put in to keep on track to those conditions were already set by the IMF, and there has been recognition of that, the IMF acknowledging the efforts put in by the Pakistani authorities. How likely high are the chances of the approval of longer and a larger IMF program under EFF?
Very likely, very likely, because usually our IMF programs usually do not conclude successfully, to say the least. So then we have been jumping from one program to another program, and whenever that new program is required, we have not, in previous program we have not completed those conditions. Now this the interim program that we just had for 1 year, right? So it was a sort of a transitionary program, but all the there were series of implementation from the previous program that the government did in a hurry. Just as in the last 1.5 years, we have done a lot of things, right? And then also during this interim program, so a lot of stuff has already been done. So previously, government of Pakistan had an issue vis-a-vis IMF that we would agree to a program, and then IMF would think that we are dragging our feet in terms of its implementation. Now certainly IMF is seeing, I mean, that is what is apparent, that whatever we agree to, whatever we commit to, we are doing that. So that gives a lot of confidence in whatever commitments Pakistan is making, right? So with that greater confidence, when Pakistan is saying, and then there's a logical plan why we need a longer program, how it will bring stability. So it's not about whether the program is shorter or longer. When IMF is also, you are also, if I am presenting any plan to you, right, you would also see the logic of it, right? On the face of it, you wouldn't say that, okay, if it's a longer program, then it's bad, or if it's a shorter program, it's good. So you would look at my reasoning. So if you find my reasoning good, so it will also inspire greater confidence, right? So what it seems like that with the new finance minister, whatever he has in mind, he has been sharing with IMF, and it appears that IMF likes the logic that he's sharing, and we have a relatively good track record of implementing the last interim program really well. So based on these two things, I think it's highly likely.
Okay, Dr. Ahmed, when we talk about structural reforms, okay, so the finance minister says, after the stability and getting away with another program later on after this particular new program, larger IMF program, is once approved, and doing away with that in the longer run, and to stabilize the economy, we need structural reforms, increase in the tax base, and the privatization of loss-making enterprises. Now, for the general and easier understanding of the general public, what do we understand what the structural reforms as far as economy is concerned, the kind of challenges Pakistan's economy in particular has faced?
Okay, let me explain sector-wise. For example, in case of taxation, there are some sectors which are, a significant part of the GDP, our overall economy, like agriculture, and hardly contribute anywhere, whether it's to the provincial or through the federal, but about 1%, 2%. For example, these retailer wholesalers, we hardly get any taxes. So what has been happening in the past is that, for example, industry, which is bearing most of the burden of taxation, they were always asked to contribute more, and they were, so people who were paying were asked to pay more, and now they want to expand the net rather than going vertically. The same people being asked to pay more, they want to expand the net. That's one thing. And
going horizontally, expanding
going
it
horizontally
in all dimensions.
The other thing that's very problematic is that we are unable to export because we have such high taxes on our imports either it is custom duty or sales tax or income tax. There's so much of it is, and because of that, our imports become so expensive, so we are unable to export. And also the industry is so much highly protected that they want to trade within the country. They want to sell within the country. They're not keen on exporting. So that's another thing. And I think there are other things are like you earlier on mentioned, like IT. They think that sectors like this could bring us a lot of foreign exchange, because in the last 1-2 years, already from 1 billion to about 3.5 billion. So they expect next year 5 billion. So they think this is something where we can really, quickly go up. They're undertaking some reforms and other things. So Prime Minister just set up a digitization committee of 4 or 5 real good experts on how to grow the economy. So all these things, I think, together.
Okay, so when we talk about the taxes, now when we talk about these indicators in the monthly outlook, the FBR revenue, that is gone up 29.8%. When we talk about the non-tax revenue, that is the 104.7% increase, right? So how do we differentiate between these two as far as expansion of the tax base or increasing the tax net is concerned?
Well,
and the taxes are being collected in this particular on this particular side also, which gives us a figure of 104.7% jump.
yes, well, on the FBR side, while 29% looks, reasonably good, but the thing is, if the inflation rate is something like 26%, 27%, so a lot of it comes through inflation. So we have to see the real growth. In terms of GDP, if it's about 9%, it stays 9%, not really, because we need 15% on GDP to be able to meet our expenses. Now this non-tax, I think it's oil surcharge and such other things that are included there.
So that actually doesn't come under the ambit of taxes.
Well, it's overall taxes, but it's not the FBR revenue.
Right. So why it is only important to increase why the focus goes on FBR revenue, the increase in that particular thing, why this thing is not being taken into account, that the non-tax revenue that is posting 104% growth?
Yes, but if for example, if the international price of oil is now something like $85, $84, but if some tensions, international tensions, for whatever reason, if it goes up to $110, $120 per barrel, so they can't really keep having the same rate of surcharge. They'll have to bring it down. So this is the real income, is what comes from FBR.
Right. Mr. Haider, the structure reforms, your idea of where to start from as far as the structure reforms when the authorities speak of that?
My opinion is very different. I mean, at times what I've seen is that people suggest that we should do one type of reform first, government focus, then go to another, right? So for example, we can say power sector reforms or state-owned enterprises or tax base. The way I approach is that it's just like if you have 2, 3, 4, 5 children and they're in different grades and everyone has their own struggles in terms of education, right? It's not that I will be focusing for a couple of years on one child and then, okay, now that we are stable, then I'll focus on another, because things can go bad. In another way, country is bleeding in terms of expenses, right? So we have a lot of bleeding in terms of state-owned enterprises. So yes, we have to fix that. At the same time, we also have to fix the tax issue, right? So in terms of how do we tax, because the way we are taxing, any further push we get, we increase the indirect taxes. So that is where the common man, right? So for example, a person who drives his Land Cruiser, a new Land Cruiser costs about 15 crores these days, right? So that person is paying the same tax on petrol per liter, and a guy who has a 30,000 rupee motorbike, he's also paying the same tax.
How can we differentiate? How can that be done? How is it doable?
So that is where it's the debate between direct taxes and indirect taxes, right? So that is where taxing people based on their income, for example, another sector is your real estate sector. So people have made not billions, multi-billionaires have come up in the recent few years. Taxes paid, no, right? And that is where the whole drive on documentation is going. And some of the initiatives of the government that may be coming up are also in this direction, right? In terms of documenting the economy and how do we curb this, you know? So there's a lot of cash. If you see, in terms of the total cash in circulation, about 50%, slightly less than maybe 48, 49%. So that is in banking channel. The other is in cash, right? So all of these multiple changes, they're also connected. At the same time, we have a large government, right? So there are different departments dealing with different initiatives. So I personally feel, first of all, we should not be dropping a ball on one initiative when we focus on another. For example, FBR has nothing to do with the state-owned enterprises, right? So similarly, there are different initiatives. So one thing is that we have been focused on symptomatic treatment. Whatever we have to tell the IMF, get another installment, and let's try to manage this, and let's go ahead. And we have not been moving the needle on any of these structural reforms. Now, the message which is coming, which is really positive and exciting, is that government is showing interest in moving the needle on all of these important domains. So that is what we hear the new finance minister saying. So that is where I think there's a positive sign also for the investors. If the Pakistan economy is stabilizing, they would also feel good. If they feel good, FDI will automatically start flowing in. And the first route to FDI, for example, is all of these things are linked, right? So first route to FDI is maybe privatization. So if privatization happens, some G2G agreements happen, dollar flow comes in, that will give a signal to other private enterprises to start investing in Pakistan. So at the same time, while our state-owned enterprises problem is getting resolved, PIA has been running huge losses, right? It's north of 600-700 billion rupees accumulated loss, right? So if we can get that fixed, so it stops our bleeding, it sends a very good signal to the international markets that there's this big ticket FDI spending happening in Pakistan, so maybe they should also join in. Then come the positives of Pakistan. It is the fifth most populous country. It's a country which has a common law English system. Its population speaks English. So anyone, for example, going to China and doing business, or some African country where they do not speak English, or Latin America, it's easier to come and do business in Pakistan. So it's just about momentum. So I think I do foresee positive momentum.
Mr. Sultan Ali Haider, expert political economy, thank you very much for joining us at Views on News tonight. We really appreciate that. And Dr. Manzoor Ahmad, the member task force on FDR and tax reforms for Ambassador to the World Trade Organization. Thank you very much for your time also, for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.